The science framework in the K-12 curriculum. The science framework in the K-12. Science as whole, as provided by the National Framework of the DepEd, responds to the 21st century literacy, which is the science and technological literacy. It involves three important components. Number 1, understanding and applying scientific knowledge. Number 2, developing and demonstrating scientific attitude and values. Number 3, performing scientific inquiry skills. Science learners should be critical and creative problem solver, responsible steward of nature, innovative and inventive thinker, informed decision maker, and effective communicator. As a future teacher, you should bear in mind that you will be assisting or guiding your learners to acquire these scientific and technological skills. How are these skills developed? Based on the framework, the foundations of scientific and technological literacy are characterized by the following models, approaches, and practices which are fully anchored on several learning theories. Foundations of scientific and technological literacy, approaches and practices. Multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary approach. Science, technology, society approach. Problem or issue-based learning. Inquiry-based approach. Constructivism. Social cognition learning model. Learning style theory. This means that to teach science for learners to learn, a future teacher like you will use these theories, principles, and models in teaching. Further elaboration of the framework. Scientific knowledge is not absolute or certain. Knowledge, including facts, theories, and laws, is all tentative and subject to change due to new evidence brought about by the advances in theory and technology. Science knowledge is also socially and culturally embedded. Developing and demonstrating scientific attitude and values. What is scientific attitude? It can be defined as a way of viewing things, a curiosity to know how and why things happen, with an open mind on governed facts. It is a way of thinking, feeling, acting, and disposition towards science. Attitude can be positive or negative. Science attitude is oftentimes attributed to characteristics of scientists, but learners can also develop scientific attitudes. Here are some of the scientific attitudes. Number 1, a scientist must be curious about the world. Curiosity. Number 2, a scientist admits failures and recognizes that there are better ideas. Humility. Number 3, a scientist listens and respects ideas of others. Open-mindedness. Number 4, a scientist is intellectually honest. Intellectual honesty. Number 5, a scientist works hard and is persistent. Perseverance. Number 6, a scientist does not jump to conclusions. Skepticism. Number 7, a scientist is creative and critical thinker. Creative and innovative. Number 8, a scientist uses reason or logical thinking before giving answers. Rationale. Number 9, a scientist is willing to suspend judgment until he is sure of his results. Objectivity. Number 10, a scientist tries new approaches to arrive at solutions. Innovative. The next approach is performing scientific inquiry skills. A science-oriented mind is a questioning mind. To inquire is to ask a series of questions and find answers to the questions asked. The series of questioning and finding answers to the questions refer to science inquiry. Students' abilities that are needed to enable them to be science inquiry are presented from kinder to grade 4 and grade 5 to grade 8 learners. These are found in the matrix below.
Foundations of scientific and technological literacy. Approaches, models, practices used in the framework. Based on the framework, there are dominant approaches, models, and practices that can be utilized in teaching and learning science in the elementary grades. Being a future teacher, you must be able to understand the processes or the pedagogy of each. Number one, multidisciplinary interdisciplinary approach is the use of two or more subject areas in one lesson or activity. For example, science and history can go together when the topic is about discoveries and invention. Number two, Science Technology Society or STS approach is the interdisciplinary field that examines how science and technology shape societies, cultures, and environments, and how social, cultural, and environmental factors that shape the development of science and technology. Problem Issue Based Learning (PBL) is a method of teaching which allows students to focus on how and what they will learn. An unfamiliar problem, situation, or task is presented to the students, and the students are encouraged to determine for themselves how they will go about solving the problem. This usually occurs through a small group work and allows students to utilize their prior knowledge in the topic area and identify the gaps in their knowledge as they attempt to solve the problem. PBL is a student-centered approach to learning that encourages students to be self-directed, interdependent, and dependent as they attempt to solve the set of problems. Number four, inquiry-based approach is anchored in the idea of seeking information or knowledge. Memorizing facts and information is not as useful as asking questions that will lead to the understanding of such data and information. It is not looking for the right answer but seeking the appropriate solution. No one can learn everything, but everyone can learn the skill of inquiring attitude. Skills and ability and habits of the minds to continue learning through inquiry-based approach, teaching and learning. Number 5, constructivism is a theory that explains about how people learn by constructing their own understanding and knowledge of the world through prior experiences and reflecting on those experiences. When something new is learned, this has to be compared with the previous experiences, perhaps discarding the old if the new information is relevant. Thus, in constructivism, there is a continuous asking of questions, exploration, and assessment. In the teaching learning, it means encouraging to use active learning as experimenting and real-world problem solving to create more knowledge. Discussing about what the students are doing themselves will allow them to realize that their understanding may also be changing, thus constructing their own knowledge. Number 6, social cognition learning model has been introduced by Lev Vygotsky, where he asserts that culture is a primary factor of individual development. First, through culture, children acquire much of the content of their thinking, which is their knowledge, and second, the surrounding culture provides the learner the means and processes of thinking. In short, in social cognition learning model, culture teaches the learner both what to think and how to think. Thus, science children learn much through interactions. Lessons should be designed to emphasize interaction between learners and the learning task. Further, appropriate adult help or scaffolding is needed for independent problem solvers. Number 7, learning style theory. All learners are created equally but learn differently. This is the premise of the learning style theory, that each individual has a preference in how they learn. Individual learning style depends on cognitive, emotional, environmental factors, and one's previous knowledge. Individualized teaching and learning or differentiated instruction are likewise anchored on learning style. Individualized teaching and learning or differentiated instruction are likewise anchored in learning style of learners. The most accepted understanding of the learning style fall into 3 categories: the visual, auditory, and tactile, or the kinesthetic. Visual learners prefer to use images, map, and graphic organizer to access, understand new information. Auditory, or the oral learners best understand new concepts through speaking and listening. Mnemonic devices, use of repetition, music, discussion, lectures are some of the strategies that learners prefer. Kinesthetic or tactile learners prefer to touch, move, or manipulate. They learn best through hands-on, practicum, and other similar activities.
Characteristics of a scientific and technologically literate persons. If the learners are able to model theories and practices that are imbibed based on the framework, how then should every learner be characterized? It is expected that science teachers should be able to develop learners who have characteristics exemplified on the following: critical and creative problem solver. Learners have developed skills that enable them to analyze and find solutions to any perplexing questions of problems. They have other ways of solving problems. Responsible steward of nature. Learners demonstrate concern in keeping the environment safe for themselves and for everybody. They become citizens who take responsibility of their actions in protecting and preserving the environment. Innovative and inventive thinker. Science as a discipline will enable learners to create and innovate something simple for humanity. They will become scientists and inventors of the future. Informed decision maker. As the science learners are growing up, they should be able to develop the ability to make informed decisions, most especially if they become independent learners. Effective communicator. Science literacy also develops the ability of the learners to convey correct message to others, whether written or oral, from their fund of knowledge, results of inquiry, investigations, and many more. There is a need for science learners to share their findings. Monitoring and assessment. All throughout the process of science teaching and learning, and based on the framework, there is a continuous monitoring and assessment of learning.